Hello, guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Unique Items. Today, we're going to be taking a look at one of the older uniques in the game that's been revamped for 1.5.0, and that is, of course, the Bloodless Scream, which is, of course, referring to the fact that it causes the monsters to explode in ice chunks. Because when you're frozen, there's no blood because your blood's frozen, right? So the Bloodless Scream. It's kind of a cool name. Now, they did change this significantly from previous versions, and we need to go over some of the changes that they made to this. So first off is the passive effect. You notice on the passive effect, it has 170% non-physical damage. Now, interestingly enough, non-physical damage doesn't just apply to only cold damage or only fire damage or only, it basically applies to all damages at the same time, and it might sound kind of like I don't really know how to put this. It might sound kind of stupid for me to say this. Like, oh yeah, non-physical damage applies to all non-physical damage. But when you put it on, what you're going to notice is you're going to get a bonus, the additive bonus for all of them, not just one. And it's going to apply as damage with cold, as damage with poison, as damage with shadow, as damage with lightning, as damage with fire, and in response to effects that may scale based off of these modifiers, it actually does work in respect to those. So, for instance, if you are scaling, say, shadow damage, and you have a non-physical damage modifier, it actually does scale your shadow damage, and that shadow damage modifier actually does scale some of your multipliers and things too. So it's actually pretty nice. This is Mr. Nimoy, by the way. He's being he's so chunky lately. Look at his big chunky booty. Look at that big old chunko booty. Mr. Nimoy is a chinchilla, by the way, if you guys don't know. He likes to sleep in my shirt, which is where he usually sits while I'm streaming, and that's why you can't see him. If you ever wonder why I had like a big cancerous lump in my shirt, it's usually him hiding in there taking a nap. You can see his tail sticking out sometimes. He gets mad at me when I touch him. He's like, "Bwah." So right off the bat, you can see that there's a pretty interesting bonus there. Just a massive amounts of non-physical damage, which of course is going to help you scale basically all types of non-physical damage, including, of course, your shadow, your cold, etc. Whatever it is that you're using on this particular build. You also get a pretty nice damage bump there of your intelligence, which is pretty standard across most items these days. So 270 is the maximum you can get. We also have 12% lucky hit chance, which does vary between 12 to 16. And then we get freeze duration. Now, freeze duration is really important for this particular item, and it's because of the unique effect, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But it goes up to 70% increased freeze duration, which of course is going to increase the duration that the monsters stay frozen, and this is going to be big for your character. We also get +2 to all darkness skills. And darkness is a modifier that you'll see across the board on anything that becomes darkness. So, like even Corpse Explosion, I believe becomes darkness when you put points into it. Let me double check that real quick. But when you put points into this one, yes, it gains the darkness moniker, as you can see. So basically, any ability that is a darkness skill, say darkness, 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 we got darkness. Like these are all darkness skills. We've also got pretty sure that this counts as darkness too with the Shadow Blight. But basically anything that is marked as a darkness skill is going to get this modifier. Is that it's going to chill enemies for up to 100% and deal a massive bonus of 200% increased damage to frozen enemies. Now, unfortunately, because of the way that chill works, they're not going to be frozen immediately, and it's going to take you a couple hits before they become frozen, and they're not going to stay frozen for very long, so the 200% multiplier isn't always active, unfortunately. So, like, for instance, if I shoot them with a Blight, it's going to take a couple ticks before they become frozen, and it might not happen in one Blight, so I might have to cast 1, 2, and there we go, we've got our frozen effect. And as you can see, it stays up for a little while, and then it's gone. Now, you can obviously renew this freezing effect as many times as you can cast, but you might not necessarily want to rely solely on the chilling effect from the Bloodless Scream. In fact, you may even want to like pair it up with something like Frosties, or maybe like Chance to Freeze on your equipment, because you can roll that for tempers now. You can get like Chance to Freeze on lucky hits. You could also add in cold damage in some other ways, or chilling effects. You could throw in like penitent greaves or something. I don't have any penitent greaves on me, but there's a lot of different ways that you can add in chilling effects and have the chilling and the freezing effects happen more often. Now, in retrospect to bosses, unfortunately, chilling effects don't really work very well versus bosses. I do have a video up if you want to check it out on staggering bosses, and we did a lot of testing. And basically what we found out was the difference between like a chill on a boss and a freezing effect on a boss was massive. So if you do plan on using these, I would highly recommend that you include some form of freezing effect in your build. Whether it be Frostburn gauntlets to add additional freezing damage that way, or freezing percent chance, or whether you temper on multiple chances to freeze targets. The thing is that if you don't have some other way to freeze the target besides just chilling it, it might not be as effective against bosses. Now, if you do add in a bunch of freezing effects, you're going to be able to stagger the bosses really easily, and at that point, when the boss does get staggered, you're going to get this 200% multiplier versus the boss during the entire stagger phase, which means you're going to get a pretty healthy bump in damage during that stagger phase, which is pretty nice. On top of this, we also get Lucky Hit. Your Darkness skills have up to a 100% chance to generate 25 additional essence against frozen targets. So whenever the monsters are frozen, for instance, as I'm casting my ability, there's a very good chance that I'm going to be able to get essence back. As you can see, I'm kind of fighting the pump here. I'm kind of fighting it because I'm getting that 25% back as I'm casting my Blight, which is going to make it a little bit easier to maintain. And obviously, if you can keep the monsters frozen for longer, you're going to be able to capitalize on that 25 essence coming back, because the more monsters that are frozen, the more essence you're going to get back, and the better it's going to work. The only downside is with this one is that this is basically just not going to work at all versus bosses. Either one of them, unless the boss is staggered. And while the stagger bonus is certainly nice to have, and it's not necessary, if you're building a character around that regeneration of essence, and obviously you get to a boss, it's going to be a pretty big failing for you not to get access to that essence. So unfortunately, it's not something that you can really build around for bosses, but it is fun for, just doing regular content. The flavor text on this is: my companion swung her odd weapon in a wide arc, and our pursuer stopped short. The look of horror on his face as his body fell to pieces will haunt me forever. The Eben Pages, Canto 2, verse 9. Now, I would be interested in trying to set up a build around this particular item, and I think it could be really cool, but no pun intended. But I certainly did make a pun. The addition of additional freezing effects, I think, could definitely make this weapon far more powerful. Just as an example, let's go ahead and pull out a pair of Frostburns, because I'm sure I have some decent Frosties in here. So here's a 58% chance to freeze Frosties. And they also have fire and cold damage on them. So, you're going to get some additional fire and cold damage as well. Let me lock those. And so when you're casting, you're going to have the additional percent chance to just freeze enemies all the time anyway, which is going to result in obviously more procs of the effect, which is going to give you more resource, and in general, it's going to help you out better. Especially when you're dishing out multiple darkness skills. So obviously you could be using Decompose, you could be using Reap, you could be using obviously Blight, you could also be using in combination the Corpse Explosion with the Blighted Corpse Explosion. And I do think with the Blighted Corpse Explosion, it is very interesting. So let's grab the Blighted Corpse Explosion here real quick. And as you start using the Blighted Corpse Explosion, you can definitely get a lot of DOTs on the ground repeatedly. And in this way, you can see most of the monsters are frozen at this particular point. And there is a cooldown in between when you can refreeze targets, so you can't keep targets frozen indefinitely. You can get crowd control duration and freeze duration and things like that, which will enhance the overall effects, but you can't necessarily guarantee that the monsters will stay frozen forever. So there's always going to be a point with this item, no matter how good your freezing effects are, no matter whether you're using Frosties or not, whether you're using various items that can help enhance your chilling or increase the duration. There's always going to be a point that the monsters are going to be immune to your freeze temporarily, which does make for a consideration that you're going to have to think about when it comes to using this for damage bonuses, because you're never, unfortunately, you're never going to be able to get that 200% damage bonus 100% of the time. It's never going to be 100% of the time. I suppose like a dog hair in my mouse, because every time I stop moving it, it just does whatever it wants to do. And this is just the moral of the story with this particular item. It's just never going to be a 100% uptime ability. And I unfortunately, a lot of these just need a little bit of updating. Like, they just need an additional line that says something like, when attacking a boss, and I don't know, like, just some sort of additional thing that can make it useful against bosses. And that's one of the biggest issues with a lot of these items, is that they're not like particularly useful against bosses. But that being said, for the infernal hordes and things like that you're fighting like tons and tons of monsters, and the majority of these monsters, with the exception of the Aether Lords, which you can not choose, can all be frozen. Everything can be frozen. The Hellborn can be frozen. The Elites can be frozen. All of them can be frozen. So when you're doing something like Infernal Hordes, it could be absolutely amazing in there, getting a huge damage bump, dishing out massive amounts of damage, freezing everything, obviously getting all of your essence back, and just spamming as many darkness skills as you possibly can. And when you're dealing with something, like Corpse Explosion, which is, of course, giving you this nice little AoE thing on the ground, you're going to be able to use that Corpse Explosion to, more easily chill and freeze more monsters in a given period. So you can definitely get good effects from it. And obviously I didn't even have the Bloodless Scream on, so I wasn't freezing anything. But it's neither here nor there. I think overall it's definitely an interesting unique, and I've tried to build around it on several occasions. It has gotten a hell of a lot better than previous seasons. So if you have always been interested in building around this, now might be one of the seasons to play around with it. Although there are some other really interesting darkness items as well. Like, for instance, honestly, I'm actually really leaning toward the Mortarcrux, because the Mortarcrux is just like super interesting in my opinion. I think if I was going to do a darkness build, I would probably go with Mortarcrux as opposed to the Bloodless Scream, because the Mortarcrux looks more interesting for bossing. That's pretty much it. The Bloodless Scream is definitely one of those uniques that needed an updating, and it did get a very nice update. And if you were interested in it, it's definitely a good time to play around with it and just have some fun with the freezing effects, the darkness skills, having like the big multiplier. I think it would be better if they changed the chill to freeze, to be perfectly honest, but that's just me. Anyway, as always, I'd appreciate you guys joining my videos, even when we're just talking about the Bloodless Scream and my mouse won't behave and jumps all over the place. Isn't that right, Mr. Anyway? He's so still all the time. And as always, keep watching.